In this episode, I am once again joined by Dhammarato, a lineage teacher in the Thai Buddhist tradition, who is known for his unique one-on-one teaching conversations conducted with students online. Dhammarato critiques Western and Asian Buddhist forms, including the Mahasi method, and addresses widespread misconceptions about spiritual attainments, such as stream entry. Dhammarato gives a commentary on the Shorter Discourse to Mālunkyāputta, Majjima Nikāya 63, explains why the Buddha refuses to teach on certain metaphysical subjects, challenges doctrines such as reincarnation, and questions meditation techniques such as Mettā bhāvanā. Dhammarato also presents his understanding of the Buddha's true teachings, advises on how to find a guru and to become a good teacher, and reflects on his own training under Ajahn Po. So without further ado, Dhammarato.
He says, I have so many, let's call them seasoned students who know the Dhamma now and can take one-on-one calls. We're doing those, by the way, on Discord.
Oh, really?
Skype is closing down, and there's something close to about 600 people on that server. And some of the more seasoned students are actually quite active on the server, and they're taking calls already. And from what they're printing, publishing, or posting on Dhamma Friends, they know the Dhamma pretty well. So that's basically what it is. I mean, approaching 80 now. And in a way, I could say that my work is done, in the sense that the original intention through Ajahn Po, as I've told you before, that I'm only doing this because Ajahn Po wants the Noble Dhamma to get to the West, because the ordinary Buddhism is not liberating. And so he wanted the liberating Dhamma to get a foothold in the West, and that's what we've been doing. So my job is done. Now we can propagate it, and you can help do that. So where do we begin?
Well, I think we might have begun.
All right. So today's topic is going to be, what is the difference between what the Buddha taught and what is Western Buddhism? And along with that, what is Buddhism in general? Because Buddhism in general is not the teachings of the Buddha. It's the teachings of the Buddha with a whole lot of baggage. And that the analogy that I've used for a long time now is imagine that there is a small shrine. The shrine is only big enough for one person without his baggage. And so in order to enter the shrine, you have to drop all of your bags. Now, over the centuries, there's been a lot of baggage that's left outside the shrine. So that nowadays, when people approach the shrine, all they find is baggage. They don't find the shrine, they just find the baggage that people have left along the way. And that is Buddhism. Now, the problem is that Western Buddhism is even worse. And that I can say it like this, is that in Asia, all of Buddhism was transmitted around from Asia into, from India into Sri Lanka, into Burma, or Myanmar, into Thailand, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, then up into China and Japan. Always it went by being carried by monks, ordained monks who knew the Dhamma, had studied the Dhamma, had been living the Dhamma, and were for some reason out traveling. That didn't happen in Western Buddhism. In Western Buddhism, it was brought to the West by lay people who visited for a short period of time in Asia, and then brought back a very poor version. Mostly what they got instead of the teachings of the Buddha, they got Buddhism, but not even an ordained version of Buddhism. They got, let us say, a quickie course, basically 101. And then they brought that back, and that's what's been propagated. An example of that in the early days would be Alan Watts, but Alan Watts was more Christian than he was Zen. T.C. Suzuki was actually Japanese, but he's been dead now all of these years, and almost all the Zen places in the West are not run by ordained Buddhist monks who lived in zendos in Japan or Korea for many, many years. It's basically a bunch of old Jubus who have read a book or two on Zen, put one of those black pouches on, call themselves sensei, and are now selling what their version of Zen is without much, let us say, real foundation. But there's many of them who are out teaching various things that are attached to Buddhism in general, but are not actually the teachings of the Buddha. So now would be a good time for you to read that passage out of that sutta so that we can get a foundation with that.
So this is something you sent through from Majjima Nikāya 63?
Yes, that's the one.
And this is the excerpt you asked me to read, so I'll read it now. Therefore, Mālunkyāputta, remember what I have left, undeclared as undeclared, and remember what I have declared as declared. And what have I left undeclared? The world is eternal, I have left undeclared. The world is not eternal, I have left undeclared. The world is finite, I have left undeclared. The world is infinite, I have left undeclared. The soul is the same as the body, I have left undeclared. The soul is one thing and the body another, I have left undeclared. After death, a Tathagata exists, I have left undeclared. After death, a Tathagata does not exist, I have left undeclared. After death, a Tathagata both exists and does not exist, I have left undeclared. After death, a Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist, I have left undeclared. Why have I left that undeclared? Because it is unbeneficial. It does not belong to the fundamentals of the holy life. It does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. That is why I have left it undeclared. And what have I declared? This is suffering, I have declared. This is the origin of suffering, I have declared. This is the cessation of suffering, I have declared. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering, I have declared. Why have I declared that? Because it is beneficial. It belongs to the fundamentals of the holy life. It leads to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. That is why I have declared it. Therefore, Mālunkyāputta, remember what I have left undeclared as undeclared, and remember what I have declared as declared.
All right, so those things that the Buddha left undeclared, in fact, there's a much longer list in other places, but that you can put these in the class of imponderables, and that they all have to do with either the deep dark past or the future. And that one of the imponderables is not mentioned is what is the result of good and bad actions. You know that in fact Christianity and other religions are based upon what you do in this life is going to determine what you do in the next life. But the Buddha leaves that undeclared. He also leaves undeclared not just what the Tathagata is going to be after death, but everybody. He's leaving all of that undeclared. So reincarnation is actually not part of the teachings of the Buddha, but it's certainly a part of Buddhism because it was added on. That was part of the baggage. I'm not sure about what I said before we started the recorder, so excuse me if I'm repeating myself. But imagine that it's like a shrine, a small shrine that only one person can go into, and that it doesn't even have room for his backpack or his baggage. And so all the baggage is left outside, and over the centuries, that shrine has become completely obscured because of all the baggage that people see, and they think that that's what the Buddha taught. That's actually just Buddhism, is all the baggage of the people's belief systems that does not have anything to do with the actual teachings of the Buddha. And that in that point that we just read, the Buddha only declares one thing, and that is the Eightfold Noble Path along with the Four Noble Truths. Now, in other suttas, 4 of them, including the Majjhima Nikāya number 22, where the Buddha says, both formerly and now, I teach only one thing, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha, dissatisfaction and the end of dissatisfaction. Now, there have been, let us say, some monks and translators who would claim that, oh, the Buddha taught a whole bunch of stuff, that that sutta doesn't translate well as just one thing. But this sutta that we just read actually does point back to, no, he only teaches about suffering and the end of suffering, what is suffering, what's the cause of it, and how to get out of it. So anyone who is teaching or anyone who is telling about the Buddha's Dhamma, that's the only thing that they can talk about. Now, the second noble truth, what is the cause of suffering, is actually listed in a way that you have to see that only you are causing your own dissatisfaction. No one else is causing it. Also, in the first noble truth, dukkha, we could see that in order to see it, you've heard the word vipassana or insight meditation. Basically, the only insight, the only vipassana you need is to see whether right now you're creating suffering or not, you're creating dukkha or not. And that's all there is. There is no more insight, because if you can see that you're causing your own obstructions, you're causing your own hindrances, then you have a chance to change it. Another point about the third noble truth is nobody ever mentions the third noble truth, but in fact, that third noble truth is immediately available. As soon as you see that you are creating your own dissatisfaction and change that, you can change that into becoming satisfied immediately. There's no long-term or way out into the future enlightenment. The enlightenment is available right now. But we have to keep doing it over and over again because we keep coming back to dukkha. We keep coming back to unwholesome thoughts, but we have to have the insight to see that that's another unwholesome thought. Let's change it into a wholesome thought. And so that's where the method comes in, which has 3 major beginning qualities. In fact, in Sutta number 117, the Buddha talks about that he's going to be teaching right noble samadhi, or right unification or organization of mind, with its supports and its features. And what supports that right organization of mind, right unification of mind, is number 1, sati, to be able to remember to be in the here now. So if you can remember then to look at what's happening with you. Remember to look at the feelings. Remember to look at your attitude. Remember to look especially at the thoughts that you have, because the mind is the forerunner. And so any bad action that you would take, you have to think about the bad action before you can actually do it. And so this is where the dissatisfaction comes in. It comes in through unwholesome, hindering, obstructing thoughts and attitudes. So if we can, in fact, apply the Eightfold Noble Path, then by applying it correctly, we can be free from the dukkha right here, right now. Now, the Buddha taught this. He only taught, by the way, one practice. He only taught one meditation, and that is ānāpānasati. I'll make the point that in the 1930s, there was a big kerfuffle in Bangkok with Bikkhu Bodhi and some of the senior monks. And so the Pali University there went through a literature search in Thai, in Pali, and the results was, yes, Bikkhu Bodhi was right, that there is only one teaching that the Buddha gave concerning what we would now refer to as meditation. This is the first time that I've used that word. What the Buddha actually taught was ānāpānasati, which was the method of looking at your thoughts, looking at what you're doing, look at your attitude, look at how you feel, and look at the body. So as to look at the breathing, look at what the body is doing with the intention of relaxing the body. The same with the feelings of, the intention is to bring the feeling of sukha. Now, sukha has the quality of safe, secure, comfortable, satisfied, and as that grows, it goes into the fourth item on the Eightfold Noble Path, sammasankappa, which is the right attitude of I can do this. So with that attitude of, along with remembering to look and changing, we then begin to congratulate ourselves for I can do this. And that is what brings about the right unification of mind. And with that then comes a noble mind. That is, if the mobile mind is free from wants and desires, etc., then we're not going to harm anyone. We're going to have perfect morality or perfect sila simply because we have no reason to commit offenses. And that's the way that the Buddha taught it. And yet in Buddhism, we wind up with precepts and ceremonies and all kinds of things, and a lot of other baggage that's been added to Buddhism, even in the East, because not everyone in Thailand is an accomplished noble. But the thing that's most beautiful is that there's thousands and thousands of senior monks in Thailand who actually know the teachings of the Buddha, practice the teachings of the Buddha to great effect, and then they can lead others. Now, it's generally because of some historical things, along with what happened to massacre in India, that the actual noble teachings have been kept kind of quiet on the QT, so that only the students who want to know and ask the right questions to the right teacher at the right time will they be introduced to the actual teachings of the Buddha, and will let Buddhism kind of be out there, let us say, as a blanket or a covering for the actual real teachings. But Bikkhu Bodhi decided that now is the time in the 20th century to let that cover off, to let the cat out of the bag. Now, he did that with the Thai people, and quite a number of Thai people, I'd say at least millions of Thai, actually understand now the teachings of the Buddha because of Bikkhu Bodhi. But Ajahn Po, who was the abbot, he's still the abbot, by the way, he's 93, so you could call him abbot emeritus. He had more of an interest for the Westerners, and he wanted Westerners to also be introduced to the Noble Dhamma. Now, I imagine that a lot of people who are teaching the Dhamma will talk about the Four Noble Truths, without actually making it the central and only teaching that we have. And so that's the way that all of the other stuff that we call Buddhism has snuck in, is because they don't keep emphasizing over and over again that the only thing that the Buddha taught was the Four Noble Truths, which would be then the liberation, would be the liberation from our own dissatisfaction and our own dissatisfying mind, so that we become satisfied with life. That many people, in fact, they think that that life itself is suffering. But no, life itself is kind of nice. We all want to stay alive. Many people go to the doctors and go to hospitals because they want to live. So dukkha is not, in fact, a part of life itself, but you could say that life sucks only when we're sucking. If we would stop sucking on stuff, wanting things, trying to bring things to us or push them away, so that's where the dissatisfaction comes, thinking that it's life itself, but in fact it's something that we're doing. It's something that we're thinking. So with that, we can now begin to look at what is not the teachings of the Buddha. And that I would kind of give a list of things in the sense of these things that are called meditations, like insight meditation, vipassana meditation, or just mindfulness meditation. This is not what the Buddha taught. And you can also say that what has become of the Mahasi. Now, that talk that we had with Dan, he was pointing out that what Mahasi Sayadaw, who died in 1982, was teaching was fairly close to the actual teachings of the Buddha. But what the Mahasi method that's gone to the West is way off the mark. That in fact, the funny thing is that in, let us say, a piece of writing that comes out of the 4th, 5th century AD called the 16 Stages of Insight, it's only on step 12 that the Eightfold Noble Path is mentioned. And before that, we have fearfulness, misery, disgust, despair, and a strong longing to get out, followed by then a redoubling of the effort. Now, I've mentioned steps 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And then they start to practice the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths, probably after 20 or more years of meditation, of noting. And so the actual noble teaching of the Dhamma is forget those first 11 steps. Let's go right to the juicy part. Let's go right to step 12 and practice correctly. So the Mahasi method that's taught in the West is much more of a ripoff. People want money, you know. That's what Western Buddhism, that's the thing that makes Western Buddhism different from Asian Buddhism, is that Western Buddhism, they want to get paid. They want to have a livelihood. I've even seen people on Reddit that would justify that in the sense of, well, the meditation teacher has to eat. And the answer to that was, well, if he wants to eat, let him go eat his fill, and then he can teach meditation after he's satisfied. But if he gets dissatisfied again and wants to eat again, then go someplace and get a meal and get it finished, get satisfied again, and now come back and teach the Dhamma. But instead, what they're doing is that they're feeding off of their students. And the worst case would be when they actually put a price for the retreat and then want dana on top of that. That's pure fraud as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I'm surprised that some governments don't arrest and jail people for that. Of saying that you're a business, put a price on something, then charge that price, and that after the people that paid the price, they say, by the way, I want a gift too. I want you to pay twice. And so most of the meditation retreat centers are set up that way. And so these are the kind of places that I would highly recommend that anyone who wants to know about the Dhamma, don't go there. Don't go to a Western retreat center. Don't pay money for something that has historically been given free. Another issue is that the Noble Dhamma is often taught in either a very small group or one-on-one. But meditation retreat centers will have 100 people in there. And then they'll go in and say, oh, you have to have noble silence. You have to pretend that you're in seclusion, where in fact you're in a group of 100 and more people with the the volunteers and the teacher and the administrators and whatnot. The Buddha didn't recommend you go someplace like that. He recommended you go to the forest, go to the foot of a tree, go to an empty hut, and sit down and start looking at what the mind is doing. Start looking at the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the Satipatthana, which is the body, the feelings, the mind's attitude or states of mind, and the mind's activities. So this is what the Buddha would recommend, and yet of all the retreats that I have been associated with, they almost never teach the Eightfold Noble Path and the ānāpānasati with the 4 foundation of mindfulness. They're teaching all kinds of things, sometimes even magical things. Sometimes they're teaching things about attainments. Now, the way that the Buddha taught it, what we're going to do is we're going to lose those defilements. We're going to lose our heat. We're going to lose our obstructions, our hindrances, and that there is nothing to gain through the teaching of the Buddha. But Western mentality is all about making a profit, making a gain, attaining something. And so a lot of Western Buddhist meditation teachers will say, oh, well, you're a Sotapan, or, oh, you're an Amagami. And all that is to trick people to become attached to the teacher and give him even more money. As opposed to, oh, don't worry about if you're a Sotapan or not. The Sotapan actually has more of your dedication and your eagerness and your delight in the Dhamma, not what some teacher said, oh, you had an experience, and therefore you've got this attainment. That's the attainments in the Western mentality is basically because you had some meditation experience that was temporary. And so people then begin to lust after that one meditation experience they had, instead of just, if you had a good experience, know what you did to get that experience and go do it again. Do it as often as you like until you get over that experience. But the way that it's taught in the West is, oh, you had an experience, that means you've got this label. You've attained something. I think that the worst about it is the Mahasi group, who want to attain what they call deep meditation. Well, the Buddha didn't ever talk about a deep meditation. He taught a bit in the sense of what is coming up. Never mind what's buried deep in the ground. The only thing that you have to deal with is that which comes up. And so if you can deal with what comes up and do it happily, then you haven't attained anything. What you've done is just whacked off what came up. And so Western meditation has several, let's say, aspects of it that I would suggest that people avoid. One of the avoidance would be if they're teaching and charging money for it. If they teach and call themselves a meditation teacher because they've got a certificate from some layperson, then avoid them, especially if they're wanting money to teach you insight or vipassana, if they teach mindfulness. Basically, those are, let us say, it's very much like the pharmaceutical industry. who is not interested in producing cures for disease. They're interested in selling pills that eliminate the symptoms. And so Western Buddhism is all about selling pills for the alleviation of the symptoms, to where the Buddha actually taught the cure for the spiritual disease. So another one I would say would be Mettā. Mettā is not a teaching of the Buddha. Mettā actually existed as part of the Brahmin system before the teachings of the Buddha, before the Buddha taught. But somehow or another, that's just more baggage that's gotten strapped on. You could say, in fact, that real Mettā would be the result of correct practice, not a practice in and of itself. And so people go around saying, oh, may all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. And that's nothing but a hopeful, direct lie. You're not going to help everybody into happiness. That the teaching of the Buddha is only for a few who are actually willing to practice correctly and let the world be. Just like that sutta says, we're not interested in whether the world is finite or infinite or who's in it or what's going on. That's not our interest. Our interest is to clean the mind. The way to do it, if you're interested in the actual teachings of the Buddha and not interested in getting ripped off, then the way to do it is to go to one of the many temples. Over the years, there's been more and more Lao and Thai and Cambodian and Vietnamese temples being built in the West. There's even a few Burmese and Sri Lankan. All of this happened because of the Vietnam War, where the war was ran out of Thailand, and so a lot of the American military took Thai wives, and now the Thai wives have gone into America and started temples and wats and whatnot. And then they knew what they were doing. They went back to Thailand and got senior monks. Now, there's a lot of the Thai monks that are junior monks who want to come to America, but the Thai people know that they'll probably disrobe once they get to America, and what they want is senior monks, which makes it very valuable to have senior monks. And so what I would recommend, that if you're interested in Buddhism, go to the nearest temple. There's more than 500 of them in the West, in the United States, and probably another 100 or more in Europe somewhere. Also, if you want to become a meditation teacher, consider that the place to learn to become a meditation teacher is under the guidance of a senior monk in one of these Western Wats. And when you're ready to teach, he will encourage you to teach. Maybe once a week, have a meditation group and have a Dhamma talk. And that the abbot of the Wat is probably going to be there, kind of lending an ear, listening to what you have to say. So that's the way to actually learn to become a teacher. And yet what has happened, by the thousands of people have paid as much as $7,000 or $10,000 to do an online course that lasts 2 years, and then they get a certificate that's got some college name on it and say, now you're a teacher. And in that online course, they spent very little time actually practicing teaching, but they just listened to videos. If you want to listen to videos, I've got a channel for you. You can go listen to a whole bunch of videos. And so listening to videos does not make one a teacher. But one of the clear things that the Buddha taught was that there is 5 ways to gain the Dhamma. One is by listening to a senior teacher. Another one is by the chanting of the suttas. And another one is to mull it over, to reflect upon the Dhamma, to become friends with the Dhamma, absorb yourself in the Dhamma. The 4th way is to share the Dhamma with your friends who are also in that noble group. And then the 5th one, the important one, is to learn to teach. But you have to really know what you're talking about in order to teach it. And yet what the people in the West who have these certificates for teaching, they only teach what they've heard, which is not actually the teachings of the Buddha. And so I would recommend that if you want to teach the Dhamma, go to a Wat. If you want to learn the Dhamma, go to a Wat. If you want to ordain, go to a Wat. If you want to fully immerse yourself in the Dhamma, go to the Wat. But reading books is not going to do it. Going to retreats. In fact, most people who do a retreat, they're really spend much of the time in that retreat dissatisfied, and they only have joy at the end of the retreat because the retreat's over. Wow, it's over with now. Now I can feel good. But while I'm in the retreat, it's too much work. So I would not recommend doing retreats. What I would recommend instead is to go learn the Dhamma from a good teacher, a senior monk. This is the practice. This is the way that it's been for 2,500 years. You know, in fact, that there had never been any retreats ever until the 1950s. It's a new phenomenon. It actually got started in Burma because they wanted, when the government took over, the Burmese government took over from the British, they wanted to teach the Dhamma to mostly what was in those days we would refer to as the Treasury Department. They wanted the accountants to be honest. And so they started the retreats then to Ledi Sayadaw, which then one of those students was U Ba Khin, because he was the treasury head. And so Goenka took some courses from U Ba Khin before he was deported out of Burma to India. And so what Goenka teaches is really a modified low-class teaching, and you can see how much the students in that class suffer. That in fact there's a lot of suffering going on because the teachers give students exercises that are way beyond them, to where the actual teachings of the Buddha is an easy path. You just have to keep doing it over and over again. It's like one step after another, but it doesn't have any baggage with it. And so people, here's an example. Imagine that you had a delivery of cement in 100-pound bags, and the cement was a big container full, and it was delivered to the wrong place on the construction site. Is the small group of workers there, or maybe one worker, has to move that huge collection of cement from one part of the site to the other. Is he going to be able to move all of that cement by just grabbing a hold of that container and pulling it? Well, that's the way that people see enlightenment. But in fact, the right way to move it would be one bag at a time, one thought moment at a time. It's an easy practice when the burden is light. So this is the actual teachings of the Buddha, is to change this moment, to change this thought. And we do that by seeing, and we do that by remembering to look. So we remember to look, and then we see what's going on, and then we make a change. And over time, we are so good at making that change that we begin to congratulate ourselves that, hey, I can do this. That in fact, one of the knowledges that the Buddha mentions is the first knowledge is that no matter how obstructed the mind gets, whether you're angry or frustrated or whatever, that the senior student will know that no matter how obstructed or hindered the mind is, he can change it right now. He can come out of that and come into the state of mind that is able to see things the way that they really are. So this is actually the way that the teachings have been distorted, is because they see it as a great big thing. It may take lifetimes. It's a hard trying to do. And that meanwhile, the Western teachers are making a ton of money off of all of these people struggling. where actually it's an easy path. So, again, I'll reiterate that if you want the Dhamma, go to a temple. If you want to teach the Dhamma, go to the temple and stay, move in. If you want to become a monk, go to the Dhamma, go to the temple, stay, move in, and stay a while. And that this is the correct way to do it. But the wrong way to do it is read a bunch of books, go on social media like Reddit or whatever, go to meditation retreats, go pay high fees. This is not the correct way to do it. So this is what we have to say today. Steve?
You mentioned attainments there, and people diagnosing, to use that word, or awarding, I suppose, recognition of attainments to their students. And you mentioned that one of the consequences of that, I suppose it's a bit like Cub Scout badges in a way, you know, you go to Boy Scouts.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct.
So it's motivating, you know, because you're going for it. It's gratifying when you achieve it, but also in both of those processes, it weds you more closely to the institution or teacher that awarded you those things, because in valuing them, you also confer value back to that person. If you're saying, well, this person has told me I'm an ex Sotapanna,
exactly,
then you're actually saying the degree of gratification I derive from that is sort of reflects on the esteem of the teacher as much as anything else. So you're saying it's a kind of a trade in esteem and validation, a kind of a trade in that, which I imagine might not necessarily be consciously nefarious. I mean,
yes, I would say that when you say that, the way that I would say it is that they have not seen directly, nor have they been told by someone who can see it directly that that is in fact nefarious. They're doing it ignorantly. That's no excuse. It's just an explanation. And in fact, it's the second noble truth, that they do have the greed for these attainments. They do have the greed for the money, but they don't see it. So that ignorance is still at the foundation for keeping that kind of system going that, let us say, works a bit on symptoms, but does not actually deliver a cure. Now, one of the points that I would make is that you will never hear a Thai monk ever claiming any attainments. It is taboo to tell the lay people what a monk has attained, and it's not just a taboo, but it is what you call a defeat or a parajika, when you tell that you've made an attainment without actually having that attainment. And the way that you know that you've had that attainment is by checking with senior monks who know you very well. And so I have kept that tradition, even though I've retired from the Sangha. That gives me permission to tell the West some things that the Buddhist monks wouldn't even tell them. I can tell them a few things, but one of the things that we've discussed a long time ago, I remember you asking me about that. And the answer is, don't brag. Don't say that you've got some sort of attainment. For one thing, you're going to make enemies. So if you brag about something, whether it's true or not, you're going to have, let us say, pushback. That you've seen that with Dan Ingram, if we mention his name, that he's had some pushback. The better thing is not claim anything. Now, there is another point, and that is that there are ways where a noble can be known. Possibly the way to state that is that it takes one to know one. And there have been lay people that have been monks in Thailand and then disrobed, but have enough knowledge that they can say to their family, oh, this monk over there, he knows what he's talking about. And then that family member will go brag to a neighbor, oh, that guy's enlightened. And then it's all over town that in fact happened to Ajahn Mahaboa in Udon Thani, that he was well known all over the place to be an arahat, but he never claimed it. And so that's how those kind of things get spread, but the monks don't ever point it out like that. Now, one of the things that happened with Bikkhu Buddhadasa, and that happened more than once, and by the way, the Thai people would never ask that question, but lay Westerners would sometimes ask him, are you enlightened? Which is a taboo question. You don't ask that to a monk. And his answer was, who or what is it that can be enlightened? In other words, he throws the question back to them. You've got to define what you're talking about here. That's in fact one of the major problems with Western Buddhism, is they throw terms around without even having a clear, proper definition of the word. That's exactly what happened to Dan Ingram. He had to redefine the terms so that he wouldn't get so strongly attacked, but he still got attacked by using the words. And in fact, others have had to back off. They said, oh, I'm an arahat, oh, I've been enlightened. And then all of a sudden they find out that that didn't stick. They've had to back off. You know for sure about what I'm talking about there. So it's better to not claim anything, that you will be known. Another way of answering Bikkhu Buddhadasa's question would be, and this is kind of the way that I've answered it from time to time, would be, it doesn't matter what I say, you've already formed your opinion of me anyway. That whether I'm enlightened or not, or whether I'm a sotapan or not, or whether I'm a dirt bag or not, you've already made that decision. And now you're asking me, you're not going to change your opinion. So why should I answer that question? That's just giving you more ammunition. That in fact, one of the clear definitions of arahat, and was the clear definition before the time of the Buddha, and he used that definition, an arahat is someone who is worthy of respect, worthy of gifts. And so that's what it means. And someone who is worthy of gifts and worthy of respect is not one who's out bragging, I'm worthy of your gifts, I'm worthy of your respect. That's what a dictator does. So much for these attainments. It's better not to claim anything. You'll get more respect by not having claimed. If you claim that you're an arahat, you're going to have a whole lot more flack than you are going to have people, oh yeah, I heard that he was an arahat. And so it's not correct for the teachers then to go around willy-nilly giving people titles and attainments like that, because that does, as you say, then more entrench them into that teacher as opposed to giving them the actual freedom. On some of the videos I think that you heard, in fact, I don't even consider myself a teacher except for brand new students. That all of my old students are not really students, they're just my friends. That within the teaching of the Buddha, there is a term called Kalya Mettā, and that is a spiritual friend. And so that's what I perform the duties of a spiritual friend without claiming to be anything other than friendly.
Well, to follow up then on this issue of attainments, so it's claiming attainments is one thing, and what role, if any, should attainments or the model of attainments, have in the individual's practice. In other words, I think part of what people look for in attainments is they think, well, I'd like to achieve stream entry. I'd like to do that because I think it's presented often as a fundamental watershed moment and what, a sort of save point,
But
a checkpoint.
it's not. It's a
Sure.
process. It's
Well,
not an attainment. That's the whole point that they miss. What you could see then is, let's talk about it first with an analogy, that you see a clear running stream where in one place, because of the beavers or something, that it's got a nice, broad, deep, slow moving current, a good swimming hole, right? And the way to approach a swimming hole then is to stick your toe in, get a sense of the temperature, maybe put your foot in, and then you wade into it, right? Okay, so taking that analogy, we can then say that not the attainment, let us say the process of the Sotapan is actually defined in the Konsambhyan Sutta, number 48 in the Majjhima Nikāya, where the Buddha talks about 7 knowledges. The first knowledge I've just discussed with you, and this is a high step. That first step in nobility is a very high step. It's not held by ordinary people. It's a high step because you practice the Eightfold Noble Path enough that you know that no matter how obstructed the mind gets, you can, in fact, come out of that and see the world clearly, see the reality as it actually is. In fact, you can even use the word truth. You can see the reality. You can see the truth of what's going on. An example of that is somebody sitting at their desk poring over their bank statements full of fear. And the reality is that they're just sitting at a desk. There is no alligators, there's no crocodiles, there's no Russian mafia, there is nothing in that room to be afraid of except a piece of paper, their bank statement. And when people recognize it, oh, I'm afraid of a piece of paper, they can say, oh, well, never mind about that. Let me take a deep breath and relax and go back to a state of feeling safe, secure, and comfortable. Now, can you do that on a regular basis? That's the first step, the first knowledge. Now, I won't go through all of the details, but I will mention some highlights. The third knowledge is the knowledge and vision of what is and is not the path. In other words, once we understand that the only way to go is with the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, that we've got that firmly established, that I don't need psychotherapy, I don't need a pill, I don't need Reddit, I don't need Discord, I don't need Skype, I don't need to watch videos. What I need to watch is the only book that needs to be read is the one between the ears. Okay. The fourth item on that list of 7 has to do with accepting that we're a screw up. That most of West we're talking about, oh, you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that, and any breaking of the rule, and we become critical of ourselves. And when we can see that we're critical of ourselves rather than nurturing, we can change that too, so that we can accept our wrongdoing, share it with a senior teacher, and then make sure by remembering to practice correctly so that we avoid those kind of thoughts that lead to that kind of behavior. In other words, we accept ourselves as screw-ups. And then further along, we get really, really dedicated to the Dhamma. The 2 examples is that when the young monk is sweeping the Wat, he's not considering much about the sweeping. He's interested in the Dhamma. He's full time into the Dhamma. And then another analogy would be that the cow who is just calved, she's got a baby calf with her, and though she may be eating grass, she's got one eye on that calf. She's not letting that calf out of sight. She also positioned herself between where they're eating the grass and the forest, so to make sure that any predators have to deal with her before they can get to the calf. So that means that we guard the Dhamma. We're careful about the Dhamma, that we in fact begin to associate with those who are noble. This is why I keep recommending to go to the Wat, so that you can associate with monks and other nobles. And then the next step would be to become enthusiastic about the Dhamma, to become eager for the Dhamma. Anytime Dhamma is happening, yeah, I'm there for it. And then the last step, the seventh step, would be to become delighted in the Dhamma. Instead of being unhappy with what's happening in the world is just part of your Dhamma. And you become delighted. Everything is just okay. Everything is marvelous. Not a problem in the world. But we have to practice to come up to that step. And then that would then be in that swimming hole, lying on your back, just enjoying it and letting whatever currents drift you along, because you're quite satisfied with where you are in the moment. That would be the definition of a Sotapan, who is one who is delighted in the Dhamma and not trying to solve anybody else's problems, not trying to solve the government's problems, not hating the politicians or anything like that, just enjoying the heck out of life. That's the Sotapan. That's a pretty high station, you know. And certainly no one's going to get that through psychotherapy, no matter how many labels they put on you. Even if the the meditation teacher is actually a qualified psychologist, that doesn't mean that you've attained Sotapan. It's not even an attainment. It's a relaxation. And so, and almost always when it becomes a label, when it becomes an attainment, it's because of one meditation experience. Oh, I was sitting deep in meditation and this vision came and the white lights were there and I looked and I felt really good and now I'm a Sotapan. That's not it. It's moment by moment. Right now, every minute, we're immersed in the Dhamma. That's actually what it means to become a stream enterer. The stream is the stream of reality, the stream of the Dhamma. And I don't think you're going to find very many people in America who have done psychotherapy have come to that state. And so that label is not useful. And it's almost always misapplied. So let's not use it.
Maybe be devil's advocate a little bit. Well, not to argue with you, actually, more to ask you something related, which is undoubtedly there are people out there who feel like they have attained one of these four paths, right? I would assume that's a sincerely held belief by some. Let's assume that. They may be wrong, but let's say it's a sincerely held belief. There's no malice behind it necessarily. And I've talked to people like that on the podcast, and some of them walk back their claims after a certain amount of time. That's true. They think that they've achieved this, and then as time goes by, they realize, so actually it's not quite that, and they walk it back. And I think I admire actually that willingness to sort of adjust that. But on the other hand, I think there are some, and I've spoken to them privately or some on the podcast too, who don't walk it back. And they think, well, maybe I overestimated myself on occasion, but now as the years have gone by and I've attained more, I'm level 1, I'm level 2, I'm level 3, I'm level 4. And they describe it as a watershed moment, a transformative experience. I'm different than I was before. I can never go back. Now, of course, one hears the same sort of thing in other religious contexts too. People really believe that they have a transformative experience with Jesus who talks to them, etc. Or it's not dissimilar to those kinds of claims, at least in their structure. But what's going on then with those people who are convinced that their experience matches this idea of the attainments being a sort of watershed moment, and they think, no, I am level 2, I've done it, I'm level 3, and furthermore, I'm going to talk about it And you know why I'm going to talk about it? Because I want other people to know it's possible. I want to inspire others, because what's happened to me is so transformative and so wonderful that I feel obliged. I have a kind of compassion coming, to put it in Buddhist terms, to share this with others. So this is what people say. So what's going on with that kind of a situation, you think?
All right. The first thing that I would have to say is that you're describing is more common in Christianity than it is in Western Buddhism. And it is completely absent in Thai altogether. That, in fact, you could say that mentality that you just described is, in fact, a Christian mentality that's been shoehorned into Buddhism. All right. And that without trying to ruffle feathers, you could see then, in fact, that when I walk and I talk with Jesus, it's just a delusion. They're walking and talking to imaginary teddy bear in their own mind. And that, in fact, one of the most important qualities of Christianity is that you cannot do it on your own. You have to have Jesus to fix you. And so Christians are often that way, saying, oh, I have been repaired. I have been fixed. I had a conversation with Jesus, and he said that I'm of this and of that. And now, in order to save others from their sins, I'm introducing Jesus as if I were a saint. Okay? So what you're talking about is actually quite common, and it's almost always quite bogus. And one of the ways that I would say it, kind of in a humorous way, if somebody claims that they're a soda pine, not just step on his foot, but stomp on it really hard to see his immediate reaction. Because the soda pine is going to respond one way, and an ordinary person claiming to be a soda pine is going to respond another way. And in fact, I remember one time congratulating Dan Ingram for being able to put up with some of the crap that even some monks was throwing at him. Okay, so this is the way it actually requires some sort of severe trial, that if you say that you are fireproof, the only way to prove that you're fireproof is throwing you into the fire. So why bother to have that sort of encounter? Why go around saying that you're a this or there, or you're a that? The better way to do it is to let people see how you are, how you respond to things. Let them make their own judgment, because they're going to make their own judgment anyway, no matter what you say. Then, in fact, most of the people who hear what you've just talked about is going to say, is that so? And they'll walk away full of doubt. They don't believe you. They don't believe the Christians, and they don't believe the Buddhists who claim that they've attained something, that the way to do it is to live it. Just like Bikkhu Bodhi. They would ask him, and he wouldn't answer. He would throw it back on them. What is it that you think is enlightened? Who and what and all of that, because he's actually coming from the position of there's no Bikkhu Bodhi there. That the Buddhadasa that you have in your mind is your own Bikkhu Bodhi, not the real deal. So there is a Zen koan that you have heard, that if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Do you know what that koan actually means? Well, how do you know that you met the Buddha on the road unless he tells you so? And if he tells you so, he's probably lying. Go ahead and kill him right then and there. Now, when we say kill, we don't mean take a dagger and stick it in him. What we mean is to ostracize him, to stay away from him. And then, in fact, in the time of the Buddha, that would happen, and that the monks also would not deal with that guy. And pretty soon they would leave the Sangha. That would be especially true if he committed a parajika, or if he would not, in fact, learn. That I've actually done that on 2 or 3 occasions when I find someone who comes on to our Skype group and refuses to learn, he has his own ideas, then I've eventually taken him off, because he's not there to learn. He's there to prove to us that he's got something, claiming that we don't, when in fact we're actually practicing the teachings of the Buddha, where he's some sort of psychologist-oriented guy. So when you see a Buddha on the road, kill him. In fact, there's a group called Buddha at the Gas Pump.
You're speaking metaphorically here, of course.
Yes.
And when you talk about stomping on a Sotapanna's foot, you don't really mean to stomp on his foot. You're trying to make a point. You're not inciting people to go out and find Sotapannas and attack them physically, are you? I know that you're not, but the internet's a funny place, Dhammarato.
Yes, exactly. That's the point. Is that some people demand proof, and so for those who demand proof, there is a way to get the proof that you're looking for, but we don't have to demand proof. We can do it metaphorically. Then, in fact, the Buddha talked about it in a particular sutta. It's called, I think it's Akasi, the horse trainer. Do you know about that sutta?
Rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the horse trainer says that when a horse who is trainable, but will not take the training when I train him softly, when I train him hardly, or when I train him both softly and hardly, and the horse does not respond and does not become trained, I'll kill him. And the Buddha said the same, that he does the same thing. And then Kasi asked him, do you really mean that you'd kill somebody? And he says, no, I would ostracize them. That would be the killing. So the same thing metaphorically. And you can stomp on that so-called Sotapan's foot if you know how to ask the right questions without actually applying force. You can trap them. You can ask them only questions that a noble knows how to answer correctly. Like I said before, it takes one to know one. So you have to know what the right questions are. And so for all of those people who are still students of the Dhamma, they don't know, through their lack of own experience, they don't know the right questions, just assume that the guy is lying.
You were going to say something about Buddha at the gas pump.
Yes. Well, my story then about Buddha at the gas pump is that people don't stay at the gas pump. They fill up and they leave. And when he gets out on the road, kill him. Don't kill him at the gas pump. Wait till he's out on the road, because that's what the sutta says. If you meet the Buddha on the road, not at the gas pump, but he's not going to stay at the gas pump long. He's going to go out there selling himself.
Oh, I see.
So that's just a joke, metaphorically. Yes, I'm speaking metaphorically. Thank you for pointing that out. I thought that I had, but probably not enough so that we can kind of, let us say, stomp on that point that we're not actually stomping on feet.
No, I think you made that clear now, yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for making that point very clear.
And maybe the last thing I'll ask you then about is this idea of certificates and teacher training certificates. I'm speaking now from what I've heard you say, what I think I've heard you say. I'm reflecting what I think I've understood of what you said, which is part of the idea of attainments is this sense of progress. It's this kind of sense like the clubs, Cub Scouts getting your next badge and that sort of stuff. It gives you a pathway and it's motivating and validating. And it also has this sort of community aspect too, and this exchange of esteem. Well, then we have this idea of teacher training certificates, distance learning, or maybe sometimes I think they have 1 or 2 in-person retreats for a week or 2 over the course of the training too, that often have a sort of hybrid model, I think. And at the end of it, presumably, you're able to teach meditation, I guess. And I think in some cases that teaching meditation is the ability to sort of describe a meditation technique in real time, a kind of guided meditation. You learn to be able to do that, deliver a sort of script in a sense. In others, I think some of the other trainings they do suggest that you can take students and not just deliver a guided meditation, but maybe even guide someone in their practice and so on. Quite a remarkable thing to achieve, I think, in a 1 or 2 year course of distance learning hybrid model. So, I mean, well,
let me answer.
Sure.
Okay, because there's several points in there. First one, let me do it this way first. Okay, you probably, and almost everyone, have seen the old movie from 1937 called The Wizard of Oz. All right. And you know that the wizard then, after he got caught or whatever, he bestowed on the lion a heart. He bestowed upon the scarecrow a certificate. And I forgot what it is that he's bestowed to the Tin Man, probably a bottle of oil or something. But anyway, that what you're talking about of giving the scarecrow a certificate so that he now trusts that he has a brain. And that confidence is absolutely essential. The problem is that the information, the knowledge that they got is probably not liberating. For instance, they learned how to do a guided meditation, but they're not using a noble guided meditation. They're using more of a technique like Goenka did a guided meditation that he would call scanning. And that I was actually doing that with students when I was teaching at Wat Suan Mok, and I stopped. I figured that I was not going to do that anymore. And the reason that I stopped doing it was because students kept asking me, oh, will you do that guided meditation again? In other words, they began to rely upon it. And so now I've only, in the past 2,000 videos, the past 7 years or more of videos, I have only done 2 or 3 guided meditations. I don't do them. I figured that if the student knows what to do, he can guide his own mind through unwholesome thoughts. That it's up to each one of us to practice. But when people do guided meditations, when the teacher teaches through guided meditations, the students become dependent upon those guided meditations. And above all things, the teaching of the Buddha is, it's up to you. You're the one who has to make the changes. No one's going to do it for you. But a lot of Western Buddhism has to do with the teacher's got a certificate. Oh, the teacher does good guided meditations. Oh, the teacher is something special because he was trained by someone who said he was special. And yet none of them are actually teaching the liberating Dhamma as taught by the Buddha. And so certificates do have value. The question is it only value in the sense of alleviating symptoms, or is it an actual cure? And the Buddha taught a cure for dukkha. Then in fact, in psychology, they have a thing they call the doorknob. Are you familiar with that? To where after the hour is over and the client, their time is up with the psychologist because he's got people in the waiting room or whatever, and just as they get to the door and get their hand on the handle, they'll ask the real reason or the real question that they came to therapy for after their time is up. Okay, so that's quite common that people take a long time to get around to the point, which means then that they don't ever get real solutions. What they get is a pat on the head, or you're a good boy, or here's a certificate, or I'll give you this label, and all of that kind of stuff to make people feel good for a short time. But it's not an actual cure. That's what I have to say about certificates. How long did that scarecrow feel good about the certificate the Wizard of Oz gave him? At least right then he felt good. What does he need? A new certificate every day? The old ones wear off pretty quick. And yet there's been thousands of people who have been given a certificate to teach meditation when none of them are teaching the actual teachings of the Buddha. That in fact, at one time when I was a monk in California, I was talking to some students who had been there. And when I was teaching them about the Noble Dhamma, they would say, I never heard that as Spirit Rock. Oh, they don't talk about that as Spirit Rock. They don't talk about the right stuff. They don't talk about the Eightfold Noble Path and the 7 factors of enlightenment and or the 7 factors of awakening. To where, by the way, a factor is an awakening factor when it is practiced unremittingly, over and over and over again. But a certificate is just a one-time shot. Being given the label of Sotapan, that's just a one-time shot. It's like getting a new girlfriend. You really like it when you get a good new girlfriend. And you want that feeling, so you want to go get another girlfriend and another one. Because the girls get old. They become friends, but that wow feeling gets lost over time. To where, with the real teachings of the Buddha, you can have that wow feeling anytime you want it. And because you can get it easily, why bother? But other people are out there lusting and craving for that wow experience. That's why they're doing the meditation, is so that they can get a meditation experience. They want that wow. That in fact, it's actually part of the ānāpānasati Sutta. But Bikkhu Bodhi says, be careful about that wow, because it's always temporary. An example of that would, when you climb a mountain, when you get to the very top of the mountain, you're not going to stay there. Nobody stays at the top of the mountain. They always have to come back down. And the same thing true is with those wow experiences. And so they're always temporary. It's just a moment. A new girl, a new label, a new deep experience in meditation are all temporary. What we're looking for is a permanent cure for the desire for wow experiences, or the wanting of wow experiences.
Well, a teacher training that teaches teaching skills, I think, is one thing. But a teacher training can't really give you the practice itself. That probably is something one has to acquire outside of that teacher training, and then you come to the teacher training to learn teaching skills. I don't necessarily think that's such a big problem. But expecting to, I mean, people do graduate these trainings having barely practiced at all themselves. And I mean, you can say, well, that's bad because they're going to be misleading people. And yes, that's true. But also, I think it shortchanges them a bit.
Yes, yes, it does. Now, I'll give you another analogy or a metaphor, and that is what's happened to modern universities. You know, when universities first got started, let's say even back in the 1600s or in the United States when they first started doing universities, even maybe before the land grant schools, that it was a very small group of people who got a university degree, which means that the student to teacher ratio was much better for the student. Now, it's almost like you've got to go do a PhD in order to get close enough to the teacher to get any value from it. That the bachelor's degrees have been completely watered down. I've been in classes even in the 1960s where there were 700 or 800 students in the class, in a big auditorium. Had like 25 student assistants or teachers' assistants, mostly just to grade papers. So universities have gotten watered down that way too, so that people, I mean, even nowadays, PhDs are a dime a dozen. And in fact, there are too many people who have PhDs that, in fact, you could say that a modern day PhD would be the equivalent of a high school education in the old days. And so with that, we can say that the same thing has happened with so many things, especially the spiritual teacher kind of thing that's happened within Buddhism, that it's a natural part of everybody's progression, to where in the Bhikkhu Sangha, basically the training is always one-on-one. Maybe, in fact, you could say 2 teachers or 3 teachers to 1 student, as opposed to 1 teacher and 700 students. But you can make a lot of money if you've got 100 students or 1,000 students in the meditation retreat or in the class. That's why money has become a part of the problem, which is also the same thing that's happened with universities. In the old days, money was not the issue. Now, tuition is sky high, especially in the States. It's become a racket. And the real education, by the way, is done by the student on his own. And in fact, most students, when they're taking a class, they only want a grade, they want credit for doing the class, rather than actually doing the class. I see that often, that the students go to class, some of them will take notes, and others are lollygagging or on their phone or whatever, and very few students are actually listening and paying attention to the teacher.
They want the certificate.
Yeah, they want that certificate, exactly, rather than wanting the education. And so that's what I would recommend is anybody who wants to be a good teacher of the teaching of the Buddha, go find a good teacher who's going to spend time with you. In fact, one of the things that I would recommend is that if you drive a car, become the abbot's chauffeur, so that you have time to spend with the abbot when he's going off 30 minutes away to somebody's house to enjoy breakfast and to do a house blessing or something like that. On the road, you can learn some Dhamma from that abbot. And so that's the way to do it, is to go find a really, really good teacher, the abbot of a Wat, a temple. And we can find those, whether he's Vietnamese, whether he's Mahayana, whether he's Thai, Laos, or whatever, go to a temple. That's the way to get a good education, is go to a master teacher, someone who has been a monk for more than 20 years. No, by the way, it's part of the tradition, as well as in the Vinaya, that an abbot cannot be an abbot of a wat or a temple unless he's been a monk for 20 years. So he's had a time to get his PhD in the Buddha's teachings. And so I want to reiterate that over and over and over again. For anybody who's listening to this video, forget paying money to a layman. Go to a Wat, and by the way, it's free. Go hang out. Go sleep in the meditation hall. If you just show up at a Wat and sleep in the meditation hall, you'll get somebody's attention. Because that shows that you care enough about being there. But a lot of Westerners are put off by all of the trappings of Thai culture. That when you go to a Thai Wat, you've got to wade through a lot of Thai culture to get to the actual abbot. And going and starting asking questions like the first time you go, oh, can I be a teacher here? He's going to say no. He doesn't know who you are. But if you say online, oh, can I join your meditation class? They'll say, sure, here's your price. You pay up and you can take the class. So you're going to get some no's from the old master. He wants to know you. He wants to see that, are you really dedicated? Are you really interested? Are you really into the Dhamma? For the value of the Dhamma, not the value that you can get out of it by having some certificate or some label or some paycheck. But they want to know, are you really willing to make a change in your life? That's what I recommend to any and everybody who listens to this video and hears it for the first time. This is not about me. It's not about you, Steve. It's about, if people really want to know the Dhamma, go find someone who really knows the Dhamma and become a one-on-one student with him. And I was very fortunate to have a friend like Ajahn Po. My years with him were extraordinarily valuable. And he didn't even have a high school education. In fact, he became a monk, a student monk, a samanan, at the age of 6. And he's been in the robes since he was 6 years old, and he's 93. And he does not have one piece of paper anywhere that says who or what he is. But he lives the Dhamma. And that's what really a Sotapan is one who is living the Dhamma. Eagerly, delighted in it, completely immersed in it, as opposed to being immersed in some deep meditation state. That's what they normally think it means. No, we're talking about immersed in reality.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you very much, Dhammarato.
I've enjoyed it. I've had fun. Thank you for asking what you thought were tough questions. Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate the time. And one last thing is that I would highly recommend people who, if they want to hear the Dhamma on videos, we've got the video channel. It's got nearly 2,000 videos. But I would also strongly recommend that people join the Dhamma Friends Discord group, because there's a lot of people on that group who really know the Dhamma.
And I'll put links to both of those in the show notes, of course, the YouTube channel and the Discord. And people can also find that just searching your name and, in Google and YouTube and things. It's all findable that way too. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Dhammarato.
Go have fun.
Thank you for listening to another Guru Viking podcast. For more interviews like these, as well as articles, videos, and guided meditations, visit www.guruviking.com.